recording in progress. The aim of our session today is to use this as a working meeting and a fairly standard birds of a feather activity where different brains in the room can contribute to an outcome. We plan to have a little bit of a slow start, given the fact that it's fully virtual. People might be joining online for the first couple of minutes and sorting out their tech matters. So it's a good opportunity to do a general welcome and some introductions around the room. Give us a sense of who's attending. We'll also have a Mentimeter session, which will give us a little bit more of the flavour of who's in the room. I'm very thankful to my colleagues who've helped to organise this session. So from the group that's helped prepare this session in the room, and we have Witold, Amanda, Lisanne, Claire, and myself. Unfortunately, our colleague Jitka, who put in a lot of work to get the presentations organised, to keep us organised and to do the initial submission, is unable to join us, but we acknowledge her work and contribution in the work so far, and she'll certainly be involved going forward. I'll do a little pause for maybe the colleagues that have helped prepare the session just to briefly introduce themselves after myself. So I'll ask Claire to go after me. My name's Luke. I work in Australia as a Director of Research Technology, which in our university means I look after high-performance computing, but also research data. My interest is in data disposal, obviously, as one of the sort of the activities, and I've been involved in some RDA practices, but not very involved. But I've been quite involved with some of our national programs around data disposal, and I'll tell you a little bit about that later. Hi, I'm Luke.
Thanks, Luke. Kia ora, I'm Claire Rye. Greetings, everyone. So I'm from NESI, the New Zealand eScience Infrastructure. So we, I guess, are a national resource for high-performance computing in New Zealand, but also do a reasonable amount around research data. And so I'm the product manager for data services there. And I'm one of those people who gets a bit excited about metadata. Have been working, I guess, with Luke over the last couple of years on a few data-related projects. Amanda, did you want to go next?
Thanks, Claire. I'm Amanda Tomei, and I am the Preservation Coordinator for the Digital Research Alliance of Canada. And I work primarily with our Federated Research Data Repository, or what we call FERDR. And I work on long-term retention, preservation, reuse within the repository structure. And I'll turn it over to my colleague, Lisanne.
And so my name is Lisanne Kadir. I'm a Senior Solutions Architect, also with the Digital Research Alliance of Canada. My role here is to start looking at how best to move data across the DRI, so right off the simulations and HPC and all the way to open access and everything in between. So what are the storage mechanisms that we need to make that happen? And obviously, one of the big ones are what are the events that can trigger some data to move to the next life cycle. And so very happy to be here today.
So I guess I'm the last one, at least from the people being here. So hi, I'm Witold. I'm with the Central Research Data Management of the German Aerospace Center, DLR. And I also am the coordinator for the research field aeronautics, space and transport at the Helmholtz Association, where I work towards aligning the data within the Helmholtz centers along FAIR principles. So this is mostly my work. And we obviously have a vast amount of data and are now starting to look into how to safely dispose this.
And then Amanda, did you want to say hi?
Oh, I already said hi.
No, sorry, I was swiping between things.
That's
and
okay.
I missed that with audio. So I'm acknowledging that we've got a large and what looks to be a great mix of collaborators in the room. I want to thank you all for joining at whatever time zone that you happen to be in the mix with us here today. I'm confident that you've been through a BoF session before, but just to calibrate our expectations for today, this is a working meeting, and we would like your brains to contribute to this process, and especially your fingers typing into a document, and then as appropriate, sharing some of that content with us through interactions. We've designed the process to be sprinty, fairly short little bursts of activities to see if we can move us through an agenda and keep you all engaged, especially at different time zones. And so we'll share a document with you, and we'll hope to have you contribute into that document. We'd also then like you to register your names and details into one of the documents with us, so that we can collect who was there and then keep you involved in our processes going forward. Andrew, I note your hand.
Sorry, I was just going to ask you what success looks like, but I assume success looks like a case statement that you can submit for a working group.
Correct. So that's what I'm coming to. The output of this activity is to determine if a working group is needed. Then if a working group feels like it's needed by this group, what could a working group deliver? And if that delivery is possible by this group with sort of velocity and momentum that we can generate over the next period of time, we prepare a case statement for submission. An interest group gives us a bit more flexibility to just talk about things. A working group really requires a deliverable and an agreed activity. And so that's the role of this BoF today, is to help us determine over the next two sessions if there's a there, especially around this topic of disposal. So sometimes people turn up to the room just having read very briefly the title, and some of us have gone and done the full reading of the introductory statement. We're very happy to have you in whatever capacity you join us, but the expectation today is really to help us work through some ideas and then determine if a working group is appropriate. That will then take some work on a few of us to generate some outputs, and so then that contribution is expected to carry through into an active working group participation. Does that sound like a fair summary for those of us that were involved in preparing the documents? If so, Claire, I'll ask you to start up the slides. We've got some slides that we're going to use mostly as a warm-up activity, and we'll flip from some presentations that are aimed to get us thinking. So if you move just through to the agenda slide, we can see that the majority of the time is dedicated to a guided discussion. We'll share in the chat just now the working document that we're using for the session. At the top of that document, there's a way for you to add your names and details, and I can see that a lot of you are already doing that. The use of the document is going to be our primary product, and so give yourselves time to get into that document, scroll around, get a little bit familiar. You'll have to add rows for your own contributions, and so being familiar and just comfortable to add a row to the Google Doc is something that you can do, and make sure you've got a couple of rows for your own comments ready to go while you're listening to some of the presentations. Like I said, we'll have a little Mentimeter to warm us up, to find out where we're all from, and hopefully some time for some Q&A after the presentations, but probably just only a short amount of time. We really want to spend the majority of our meeting in that guided discussion process, and to see if we can have some interactivity around the the topics and the line items. So that's our planned practice for today. Are there any questions? And I'll look to see on the slide, on the presenter view, to see if there is anybody with participants with hands up. All right. I don't see anybody asking questions. If you do, just shout out. All right. Well, we're excited to have a conversation about data today. That sounds boring to lots of people, but I think I'm amongst friends with this audience in particular, where some of our data questions are very important to us, to our organizations, and up to national and international level. We'd like to present from our a little bit of an international flavor around topics related to data disposal. And so to get us started today, we've got 4 short presentations. We'll keep as close to the 5-minute presentation to keep it punchy. The idea is not to tell you everything that we're doing. The idea is to get our brains engaged. And then there's follow-up materials, obviously, with each of the presenters if you're interested in their particular topic areas. So Witold, would you like to get us started?
Yes, Luke, thank you very much. So I'm trying to give a very, very brief overview over the situation, what's called also experience in Germany. And I'm also showing a bit of the activities that are happening exactly in this field at the European level, which is the European Open Science Cloud and their activities there. Again, this is a very brief overview, and I hope to go further into details in the discussion part later. So the next slide, please. So an attempt at description. To the left, you see whatever map of Germany, which also might be the Holy Roman Empire of German nation, but it describes pretty much the situation that we have in Germany. So we have a vast landscape of different research organizations, networks of research organizations, and they all are differently funded. They are in different federal states. And this means that all of them have quite distinct situations, how they deal with research data and what they even consider research data. So while there's a lot of overlap, there's also a lot of specificity. And this, of course, makes things a bit complicated if you want to look into how to do, well, data storage, for example, and data retention. So the next slide, please. There's, however, one central sentence that pretty much everybody in Germany is referring to, especially when they're in doubt. And this is now quite old recommendation of the German Research Foundation, DFG, who does a lot of the research funding in Germany. And they said already in 1998 that primary data as a basis for publication should be stored on durable and secure media in the institution where they were generated for 10 years. And that was pretty much everything that was said on data retention in Germany for a long period. And as you can imagine, there's also a lot of unclarity there, because the idea was at that time, we need to store the data that we used for publications so that somebody else can later prove whether this experiment, for example, worked. So it was really more concerning investigations of scientific misconduct, not necessarily data reuse or use of data for whatever other purposes. And they didn't specify anything besides this sentence. So there's nothing about forms, format, whatever metadata you should have, and especially not who's responsible for this, besides it's lying in the institution where it was generated some time ago. So the next slide, please. Technically, this is a DFG conforming way of storing your data. You just write it onto a USB stick and you throw it somewhere else, and that's it. You don't even have to be able to find it. You just have to store it somewhere. And you can replace this obviously with things like NASes in working groups or shared drives somewhere on a server. You all know the situation of, let's call it orphaned data that lies somewhere in whatever form, and nobody really knows what it is and who's responsible for that. So the next slide. And obviously, this is a situation we are all very aware of. And there's work going on to deal with it. But we have this problem with the organizational diversity. And this goes far beyond the research field, where there's, well, sort of cultures, how to deal with data, and the funding, because, well, you have to pay somebody to curate the data, and you also have to pay for the hard drives where the data is living. But this is all moved around the networks, it's moved around the funding lines. So this creates another dimension of confusion, to be honest. And what we as the colleagues in this field often meet is that the idea of long-term storage and the policies and the funding around this, it comes often intermingled with something like a basic need for research data management. So even before we start talking about data retention, we start about research data management, and this obviously bogs things down a lot. So we have a high degree of cooperation that is going on in the research fields themselves and in the infrastructures, but there's almost nothing going in between them, though the needs align a lot. And we see this as a problem mostly through financing, because usually things are third-party funded or at least project funded. And we have the situation where the funding isn't exactly set up to take care of things that are happening after the project is done and whatever publications have happened. So far, the only ones who are doing this are archives, museums, and libraries, because by definition, they're keeping things for a longer term. So the next slide, please. And this has now changed a bit because there's a lot of pressure coming. And we are seeing this on different levels. So first and foremost, large institutional data centers are looking into dealing with this problem, because obviously storage is cheap, and storage technology grows at least fast enough that it can keep up with whatever data we're throwing at it. But you can't just keep data on a platter. You need to have people to care for it, and this is expensive. So they're looking into that. There's also work happening on the Helmholtz and NFDI level, where there's, for the first time, an interlocking of actors that I've described earlier, who weren't necessarily working before because they were so separated by culture, by funding, by institutional type. And those activities that are happening, however, are intransparent to outsiders. So even though I'm involved in this field, I'm absolutely not aware of everything that is happening. And I'm also not aware of what is not happening. So we try to find a way to work towards a landscape mapping of what is going on at all. That would be the and the next slide, please, for now the European perspective. So I'll go very briefly through this. The European Open Science Cloud had a task force going on towards long-term data preservation. They prepared several papers, and I've linked here the final report, which is a very interesting document, but it's a high-level document. So they tried to approach this mostly from a repository perspective. The next slide. What they've changed now after this task force has prepared the report and other publication is that we now have a second task force, which is the long-term data retention task force, that goes further and looks into the technical aspects of data retention, appraisal, and reappraisal, which is very much something that refers to what we are doing here. And the last slide from my end, please. So for us, this creates, I think, a very relevant opportunity for collaboration, because people who are involved in this working group, which is in the moment of being created, and we don't know for sure who is involved there, will have people from the research performing side, but also from the infrastructure side. And I think we need to have contact to both sides. And this is one of the major activities that is happening in this regard in Europe. So that's it from my end. Sorry for being a bit longer on the time. And I hand over to Luca, I guess.
Thanks, Witold. I'm going to say next a few times quickly in succession to Claire, who's going to help us move the slides along. So this is a summary of a project where the reports are now publicly available. And so I'm going to gloss over a fair bit of the detail, but here just pause quickly to acknowledge, obviously, our colleagues and collaborators who participated in this project and recognize that this work was cross-institutional and national in scope. Next slide, please. Our activities were really around two core projects, which are there highlighted in red. Next slide, which have an interactivity between them, where we felt that the two projects hung together neatly, because we needed to know what we were acting on so that we could do the actions. And so we think that there's a fair bit of interesting work in this BI reporting project that might also be of interest to you. Today, we're focusing explicitly on this idea of retention and disposal and what we might be able to do to take actions in a data lifecycle. Next slide. This was a project over a year, and you can see the growth of my grandchild at various meetings that we held. And the next slide, please, Claire. We're at this stage of growth at the moment. This report really had five main activities. As I said, we wanted to unravel the data lifecycle and really think about where in that process we could take actions. The core work of the activity was around operational opportunities, and that's the bit that I'll focus a little bit on today. To do that, we needed to work with the metadata, and that seems obvious, but pointing out which metadata might have the most value is quite interesting. And then what some of the challenges, obviously, we'd have to deal with at a national or institutional level. Next slide, please. So the observation really, many of us will be familiar with this idea of the data lifecycle. And the next slide. As we started, like Witold said, what's the overall overarching requirement, and how does that then impact down into your institutions? Well, we did a scan, and we had quite a number of different answers in Australia, depending on the types of programs that you worked on, which jurisdictions you were in, and really what policy frameworks you thought you were under. You might have implemented a number of different rules or not within your organisation. Pretty much the default in Australia is we don't delete anything at the moment. We just keep it in fear that somebody might come either knocking on our door for it, or that somebody will yell at us because we've deleted it. And so some of us are taking seriously this idea now of, well, we're actually keeping a lot of junky data, so can we take some actions to delete some of it, especially after these 10, 12, 15 years. I've got data in my data archive that's now hitting that age, and the CIs are no longer with the institution if they're still alive. And so am I allowed to delete those? Well, I probably am, is the answer, but I haven't yet. Next slide, please. We as a bunch of data managers, data custodians, data owners, we felt that the data lifecycle had some limitations. And so next slide. We started working with the group, thinking about these various phases of data activities really much more as a linear thing from birth to death. We understand the cyclical nature of it, of course, but if we're starting to think about a disposal activity where in this detangled life cycle can we start to see some opportunities. And the project did some, I think, very useful work in thinking through operational activities that might be relevant to different styles of institutions. We had mostly university reps in the room, but our working group had representation from a broad range of different kinds of institutions, and they helped us as a large working group to start to unpack these different opportunities. Next couple of slides, please. So it started to look like this, and the next one, and the next one, coming out of the previous work, and the next one. And we started to map, and the next one. And we started to look cross-institutionally and repeated the exercise across a different couple of organisations. And then the last slide on recommendations, please. So really recommendation was that in order to make retention and disposal decisions, institutional policies and procedures had to consider this different sentencing states, as in what do we need to keep indefinitely and what can we then be disposing. Retention periods need to be in the metadata for us to take actions. That seems obvious, but we need to make the recommendation. Next slide. We, again, seems obvious, but you need to make the recommendation when you're saying things nationally, that we do need roles and responsibilities to be clarified, especially if you're going to implement this at an organisation level. Who's allowed to say what, and who's allowed to say that we're about to delete data? More importantly, though, we identified that humans are very poor actors in this process. Humans want to keep the data. They're bad at metadata tagging, and they're bad at taking deletion actions. And so integration and automation is really important in this practice. You can't just trust the humans to do it. Next. So we do need to engage the researchers themselves, and the researchers need to lead and determine what is research data and what that discipline and that practice needs to be kept. It can't just be a blanket rule. And in fact, we still believe strongly that it's not research data until a researcher tells us that it's research data. Otherwise, it's just an object that should be treated not as research data. And that should then evolve from discrete discussions in a broad community of practice. So that's the information from Down Under for the moment. I'll leave it up to you to read the reports. They're available through this link, and we'll make the slides available. Thank you. Claire. And can you do your slides and talk at the same time? We can't hear you.
Apparently not. I just tried to introduce myself and, unmuted. Okay, sorry, I'll try again. So keeping with the sort of quick fire presentations, I'll give a bit of a New Zealand view now, although I think, and as a Kiwi, it's hard to do this, to really credit a lot of the early work to the Australians, and really I guess the background and where at a national level New Zealand sort of got involved in data retention conversations kind of goes back to really the research data culture conversation. And so colleagues in the room from that and others not present who really have contributed to this work. So very, very briefly, the research data culture conversations really started at the infrastructure level out of Monash University, being worried about the growth of research data year on year and storage not being able to keep up with it, and coming up with some rather alarming growth curves. The very abbreviated version of this is then that conversation got broadened to sort of the top 5 research universities in Australia, and they found similar, although slightly less alarming growth curves. And then this sort of survey of data was extended nationally to all of Australia. I'm not going to talk to those results yet, but I'll share a link to those if you're interested. This is kind of where New Zealand joined the conversation, and initially it was thought that this could be a really quite nuanced survey and view, I guess, of research data. As it turned out, actually we knew very limited amount of information about the research data holdings that institutions have. And sort of learning from asking these questions in an Australian setting, when New Zealand came along and asked these questions, we I guess had learnt from that and skipped ahead to the we'll ask what we can, not the questions we'd actually like to ask, but we'll get the results that we can. So rather than being able to look at unique first copy of data, we were asking things like the first copy of digital content for research that really you're keeping for long-term storage. Again, things like total storage volumes. I think in Australia, actually, this was often found people didn't want to answer that, or it was too difficult to answer. In a New Zealand setting, interestingly enough, we did answer it, and sometimes that was the only answer we could get to that question. So just, I guess, broadly talking to the results that we got in terms of that first copy of digital content at a national level, we think we've got about 45 petabytes as of the end of last year for December 2022, if that makes sense, as measured last year. And trying to go down, drilling down into that in terms of levels of sensitive data, whether it's openly accessible, whether we understand what domain it's from. We generally couldn't, and again, which is quite, I guess, maybe nuanced for New Zealand, but also relevant for, I guess, other communities, is whether we could identify Indigenous or Maori data that was actually under governance. But again, we couldn't really do that. So I guess the conclusion is here that we think we now know something about what we hold. And the question remains, what should we retain versus just what we keep? We did briefly attempt to remeasure again to try and get an approximation of growth, but we were kind of, I think I'd used all my goodwill with the research community to try and get the numbers the first time. So we were less successful in terms of actually getting numbers the second time. So the error on our growth curve is huge, right? So we're, it might be 25%, it could easily be 30 or 20 in terms of that error. But it is still within the, I guess, not a data tsunami kind of level. So as I was saying, when it comes to the actual actions around data retention and disposal, looking across New Zealand, we have our universities and we have what we call our Crown Research Institutes. And they have slightly different retention and disposal policies. Essentially, our universities all say you must retain data for some length of time, and it says you might want to dispose of it. But there's no mechanism in order to actually do that. So we're relying on researchers and of course, in sometimes impossible situations, because they've left institutes and so on, to be good citizens and dispose of their data at appropriate times. Similarly with the Crown Research Institutes are a little bit different in that they're sort of subject to the Public Records Act, so that changes or legislates around the retention aspect of this. And I had some very useful conversations with actually David, who's on the call, who may want to talk to us a bit more later. But because of that, so that's one aspect of the retention side. Again, there's disposal acts, but often because there's no mechanism for actually doing it, it's not really done. So I think the conclusion that I've come to from talking to a fair few groups is that we're coming to have an understanding of what data we hold, at least very crudely, in terms of total volumes and then trying to dive into things like sensitivity. But we've got no idea that if we dispose of any data, and certainly we couldn't audit to see what data had been disposed. So I think that's work to be done, and I guess in this area. So I think that's me. there's obviously a lot more detail on that earlier work if anyone's interested in both the Australian and New Zealand view. Otherwise, I will pass it on to Amanda and Lisanne.
Thanks, Claire. So we've done the introduction, so we'll skip that part. But myself and my colleague Lisanne would like to talk about data retention in the Canadian context. So we'll talk briefly about the Alliance to help situate how data retention work is being conducted in the larger Canadian digital research infrastructure ecosystem. And then we'll briefly discuss data retention in FRDR and in our compute environments. Next slide, please, Claire. So the Digital Research Alliance of Canada, or the Alliance, is a nonprofit organization funded by the Government of Canada, and it's geared to advance and maintain national digital research infrastructure, or DRI. The Alliance is governed by an independent board of directors, guided by a research council and accountable to member institutions across Canada. To that end, the Alliance supports the management, storage, and use of national advanced research computing, research data, and research software. So the Alliance serves Canadian researchers with the objective of advancing Canada's position as a leader in the knowledge economy on the international stage. By integrating, championing, and funding the infrastructure and activities required for advanced research computing, research data management, and research software, the Alliance provides a platform for the research community to access tools and services faster and simpler than ever before. Next slide, please. So a bit about FRDR, or the Federated Research Data Repository. It's a generalist curated bilingual repository customized for medium to large dataset deposits. The repository launched in 2021 and has about a total of 250 terabytes of deposits, which grows on a daily basis. And this corresponds roughly to a little over 6 million files in 470 different file formats. So FRDR is very much at the beginning of its data retention journey, as are many repositories in Canada. At a minimum, we have a high-level data retention policy that indicates data sets deposited in FRDR are kept for a minimum of 10 years, and that's to correspond to many funder requirements. However, we acknowledge that we cannot keep everything forever, and not every data set has long-term value, but the processes and frameworks needed to make data retention determination are in their infancy or non-existent. And in reality, we end up having more questions than answers. So some of the initiatives we are proposing to undertake over the next year involve enhancing our appraisal process. So the process we use to select data sets for long-term preservation, and conducting an inventory of data outputs by discipline within the repository to just get a better understanding of what's in our holdings. From an appraisal, so in terms of appraisal, the curators and myself use an appraisal checklist to help capture certain characteristics of a data set. So is the data within the data set unique? Does the data set have an open license? Is it a model? Does it concern marginalized communities, etc.? There are elements of the appraisal process and the checklist itself that would benefit from enhancements, including assigning preservation levels for the various file formats used in the data set to assess risk in terms of future reuse, understanding how data is being used by using site metrics and download metrics within FRDR, but also kind of surveying the landscape. Is the data set cited in publications? Is it being used in conference proceedings and other gray literature components such as blogs or websites? And we're hoping this will give us more information to help make those long-term retention decisions. In terms of conducting this, we are also looking at conducting research output mapping exercise. That's what we're calling it now. And this is basically to better understand what types of data sets are in FRDR. So at a high level, this involves mapping data outputs such as bottle or observational data to specific disciplines and understanding how this data is being used in the present and may be used in the future, but this is very much in the conceptual planning stage at present. So this research output mapping exercise and the appraisal enhancements I previously mentioned complement each other and work alongside other activities such as preservation planning and file format analysis works, which we're currently undertaking as well. And now I will pass it on to my colleague Lisanne, who will discuss data retention in compute environment. And Claire, if you can move to the next slide. Thank you.
So thanks, everyone. Thanks, Amanda. So I've just got a couple of slides. I'm going to just talk more. So as Amanda has mentioned, we're right now looking at the development of the Canadian DRI. So really focusing on what systems do our researchers need, where are the gaps, et cetera, et cetera. So we developed an overall concept to the personas development. So this is a proposed project to better understand what systems researchers are using by their researcher domain. So this way we can better predict storage requirements, the capacity, the functionality that are required. It'll also help us better know what systems may be missing from the current DRI, so shared storage, et cetera, et cetera. The other part of this exercise is to keep newly expanded DRI evergreen. So as we start to bring systems on, we want to be able to start managing some of the content instead of having some of the content that we're finding in nearline and project space right now. It's quite legacy and it's trapped there. We don't really know what to do with it because there are no retention schedules attached to any of those storage provision. So one way to do this is to really optimize data from one system to the other. So we really want to start to better understand what are the events that could trigger the data to move from where they need to go and stay for a prescribed period of time. It could be a hard drive, it could be a shared storage drive, it could be further, and so really start to understand the data, and it could be a combination of many of those. So disposal really means dispose, move it to the next until finally delete or keep. So the two things with the retention disposition scheduling is to really start to look, and you'll see the spreadsheet. So we've itemized the 43 researcher domain high-level buckets, and then we developed a bit of a questionnaire. So next slide. Actually, it's quite an extensive questionnaire, and the questionnaire is segregated by data lifecycle stage. But because we're talking about retention disposition schedules today, there is quite a large segment there. So to really start to understand when you're filling out your DMP, how do we start to leverage some of those retention schedules and the disposition actions, as well as the access, et cetera, based on some of these questionnaires. So the idea at the end of the project is to start to really look to see if we can find some common themes across some of the researcher groups. So for example, it's possible that we know that environmental data groups particularly like to keep their data for long term. So if we're looking at data that have been orphaned in nearline, then we already know probably that's high value. We want to keep it for long term. If there is no owner, then maybe we can move that to the shared storage grid to make it available for others to consume later on. So really looking at retention disposition scheduling for us, it's again trying to optimize our systems to the best that we can and make high value data available that typically would not be available. So that's it for me.
Well, thanks, presenters. That's fantastic to get our brains into data conversation mode. The next part of warming us up is to be a little bit of interaction with what is quite an exciting large group of us in the room. And so I hope that you've added your name to one of the two documents, one of the two Google Docs. We're going to be using one of them as our main working document, the one with the tables and rows. Vitol, can you just paste that one in the chat right now so everybody's got that latest link? That's the one we want to work inside of. But as a warm-up, shine your phones at that QR code or join at menti.com with that code number or use one of the links in the documents and join us in Mentimeter for a quick little warm-up session. You can be smashing the thumbs up button to indicate that you're in the session and that we're all starting to join. We'll give people a few minutes for that number to grow and to see people joining inside the room. Look at those thumbs start to be smashed. All right, great to see everybody being there and interactive with us. I was reading through where everybody's from. It's a really cool, diverse group from all over the place. And so we're looking forward to working with you and to think about the possibility of a working group. Let me advance the Mentimeter slide now. And where you're from. If you're on a computer, use the little map on the right-hand side. If you're on your phone, you should just be fairly interactive and be able to drop a pin where you are. We've got the Euro contingent definitely present here.
Yeah.
Japan, New Zealand, which are often, certainly New Zealand's often excluded from many global maps. I made sure that both New Zealand and Tasmania were on this particular version. I don't think it includes many of the islands, obviously, in the South Pacific that sometimes we work with. Our North American colleagues are mostly asleep. We expected this to be the case. Certainly the Americas are quiet, and so we appreciate our colleagues from Canada being awake enough to help present the working group today. And so I'm fortunate enough to be in Hamburg today and very much in the right time zone with many of you. All right, let me advance the Menti. How long have you been thinking about data? Welcome to those of you where data is a new experience for you. It's a friendly community. For those of us where it feels like forever, you're amongst friends. And yes, personally, I think we're just calibrating. I'm sure we can contribute to our opinions about our organizations in a bit, both on the pro side. But I'm interested in this group as and your expertise and your willingness to think about data. I think those of us that have been in the game for a while might be more keen to hit the dispose button, although in conversations with my library friends, they're even more keen to keep the good data around for as long as possible and make those contributions. So it's great to have the tension in the room as well. I'm going to advance the Menti. Which one of these are you? There's an equal number of dog and cat lovers, or at least puppy and kitten lovers, and it's good to see that at least in aggregate, those are beating out the data lovers. That's probably a healthy representation of us as a group, and certainly might be a good mood check for us. I'm going to advance the Menti into the last section now, which asks you to be a little bit more interactive with your with you telling us, thinking about the purpose of this workshop, what type of role do you think you have, or what type of word communicates the contributions that you make within your organization, whether that's your job title or more how you see yourself. It'd be interesting for us just to get a sense of the room as we start to interact together. And I do like those, in some ways, modern terms of being data curators, data stewards, and having those responsibilities. I'm certainly on the data creation side and data user side. Fabulous. That's a really good blend of backgrounds, ideas, and thinking about data for our meeting today. The next one's the more, I'll give a couple more as we hit the 30s, and that's about where we're at, 30s and 40s. All right, the last two slides. This one, I think we might be able to reuse a little bit the content, so I'm not going to pressure you to make it perfect, but what are the kinds of data that you think about, and what kinds of platforms are those data on? So for me, it's a university data on HPC systems. It's our broad university data archive. It's all the petabytes that I have under management. And I'm just wondering from this room, what types of data do you think about, and what types of platforms do you look after? And we acknowledge those of you that take extreme good care of data catalogues. So we're seeing domain-specific data being important, the national capabilities that emerge, this idea of sensitive and health data, reference sets, and especially our big, important reused reference sets. A lot of university reps, which means multidisciplinary, multi-platform, different kinds of tooling. I'd be interested in your observations, but for some of my discipline communities, they're emerging past the boundaries of my universities and becoming more comfortable with national and international repositories. And that's making me happy that I have to look after less within the walls of my university. I appreciate your interactivity, and that's making me feel good for the practice that we're going to have inside our documents. The last slide is really just to help us calibrate again. Advancing my slide. Why is that not advancing? Here we go. And it's a reflection as we start to think about the document and leading us into some disposal activities. Can you indicate if you strongly agree or disagree with these statements?
I have a question about one of your second point. Do you
of course.
mean that we need up-to-date policies, of what we have up-to-date policies?
That you have. Do you currently have up-to-date policies? And my joke is, many of us have policies. Sometimes they're not up to date. I'm reflecting from personal current experience.
It was just about, do you want an up-to-date policy, or do you have it? So I understand better. Thank you.
Merci. If I was going to hypothesize about a set of results based on our conversations with practitioners over the last few years, the state of this Mentimeter is pretty well calibrated with my expectations. I don't know if that's what you were expecting to see as a result for this probably quite rough survey from a bunch of practitioners in a room, but it feels as a group that we have all, or at least in a majority of us, a fair amount of data to manage, and that's might still be only in the terabyte range, but it's still a lot within the experience of some groups, and certainly at the detail scale for some organisations. Policy landscape is always different as organisations go through their refresh cycles to up to date their policies. And certainly we see quite a lack of maturity, and whether that's with an expectation that the maturity will change and improve, but certainly our observation is that the processes for data disposal aren't clear, and gives us some hope for the value of a working group in this area. And certainly the tools themselves are even less capable at the moment for carrying out data disposal activities. So that was just a way of getting us warmed up. Claire, are you happy to share just the document? This is the document that we're going to be working inside of as a group, and we really want to give your voices a chance to shine through in our conversation now. And so the top of that document is where we'd love you to put in your name and details, but the work package that we're going to be working on is now down in this sprint A, where for the next few minutes I'd love you to type in some of the notes. It can be exactly what you put into the Mentimeter before. What tools or automations or practice is current at your organization? Do you use manual data plans? Do you have, do you care mostly about the storage platforms? Or are you mostly in that collection space of outputs management and more curated databases with good content? And then we'll get a sense of calibrate where the room is at. For those of you that are comfortable talking about some of your experiences, this might be a chance for you to use a few seconds, minute to introduce some of your activities or things that you're thinking about. And again, this would help us calibrate as a group. I'll pause and give us some silence to type, and then I'll call a few people to talk to some of the points. If you think that a point is particularly interesting, you might want to use some asterisks inside the box where you see somebody typing a really interesting point. And if you type some asterisks at the start, that might give us a visual clue that we could ask that colleague to maybe talk about that box and share some of their commentary. Otherwise, I'll leave you to type some items into a box for us. I will also say that given the effectiveness of translation software and some of the tools available to us, if you feel most comfortable typing in typing not in English or in a native language that you are most effective at typing at speed in, feel free to use that language. We'll do some translations offline later on, but most useful for our group if we can glance and see what your comments and inputs are. We recognise that, again, typing is both an effective and ineffective tool at the same time. But there's a wonderful snapshot that's emerging, and I really appreciate everybody's contributions. It feels like we're hitting the mark with at least an activity that feels like it resonates to a group of like-minded practitioners. There's both a dimensionality from the top down, if I can characterize it that way, from a national, what are the policies, what's the framework, and a bottom-up institutional or discipline-based perspective. In the middle, we have things like the publishers' views, the librarianship, curation, data planning activities that have been conversations in our community for a long time. I've been speaking for a fair bit. Does somebody want to comment about what they're observing in the documents or about an activity that they've been a part of?
I quite like Max's comment here. I read it before I realized it was Max's comment, but I don't know, Max, if you want to actually talk to it yourself, but
put Max on the spot. Go on, Max.
Yeah. Well, it's just the experience that I've had over the years. I mean, I work with the RDC right at the moment, but I've been in previous environments where actually articulating a benefit to the various stakeholders in this space has been challenging. And this is on the back of a quite broadly accepted convention certainly in academic research. I'll just scope it into that right at the moment, where, having access to the evidence, the evidential basis of the assertions that you make in scholarly communication is an accepted convention. But that seems to stop when we stop using language and we start using data. And my position has always been that the evidential basis for communication is the data that underpins the research. And I'm constantly surprised at how little that's valued. So that's where that comment came from. So to extend a bit more, so if you're an operational person like Luke, suddenly they have this obligation to fulfill this convention, but it's an increasing and relatively new overhead. And what's the benefit for the service providers to follow through with things like the fair principles or the care principles or the open data drives if there's little benefit to them?
And again, doubling down on the practice maybe of pointing people out. I'm enjoying Aoife Coffey's commentary around data management plans. I'll go to Françoise first, but Aoife, if you've got a comment about DMPs, I'd really appreciate your insights because it's a particular hobby horse of mine. So, but first, sorry, hand up I've lost it now, but go ahead.
Françoise, yes. I made the comment in the chat and Gilles Oanessian agreed with it. I think that we have to discuss diversity of data as well as volume, because when where I am in Strasbourg, we are dealing with disciplinary data and we document the data, we put metadata and so on, and we conserve it on the long term. it's disciplinary data. But even in a given disciplinary field, the diversity of data, when you have to put metadata, which are not only the Dublin core, it's the real issue for curation. And so it's also a parameter to decide, I think, which data you keep or not, because it has the manpower cost. It's not a cost about the volume of storage, but I really think it's one of the important criteria. And in Strasbourg, we keep data coming from telescopes and data which is attached to referred publications. So it's a criteria for appraisal. But there are many other possibilities, and it's different in an institutional data repository and in a disciplinary repository eventually. But I think you have to consider the differences between disciplinary repositories and institutional repositories, because they don't do exactly the same thing. They have additional tasks when you are in disciplinary, because you go deeper in the specifics of the vocabularies and so on. And institutional, you have a wider diversity of subjects. So how are you knowledgeable in all these topics?
Merci, Françoise. Aoife, if you're happy to be put on the spot.
Hi, morning everybody. It's a bit early here in Ireland. It's only 9:05, so excuse me if I'm a bit waffly. Yeah, this discussion is so interesting, and it's just really come at the right time for us here to get everybody's views on this. In Ireland, I think we're still very early in a lot of these processes, and the mandates for even just engaging within data management largely comes from grant applications and to do a data management plan. And I think what we're really feeling now is that we don't have the infrastructure to back that up, or we don't even have the kind of policies in place to back that up. So researchers are doing their best effort in doing a data management plan and thinking about, the value of their data and the long-term preservation if they're doing it correctly. But then what it seems to be creating within the institution is just accumulate with no mechanism for, appraisal or thinking about, is there real value in keeping this? Do we need to keep everything? And in my own institution, we just have a blanket retention policy, which seems to be translating on the ground into keep everything. So we've got research data, we've got research records, all kind of lumped in together without any real way of digging into what do we have, what's valuable, what do we need to keep, and where do we keep it. So we are developing new infrastructure, and we're trying to build in, disposal processes, or can we even get a kind of a deletion date into the metadata associated with that. But there's resistance there, not from particularly the researchers. They want good infrastructure, but actually from centrally, because we need resources in terms of FTEs and staffing to man these systems. And they want something that's very automated. And that's actually really tricky with research data, because there has to be that curation and appraisal piece built in. So that's my 2 cents on it, I guess. Data management plan's great. We're getting researchers to think about data, but I think we're playing catch up in terms of infrastructure, expertise, staffing around it.
Thanks for sharing and keeping our conversation going. I'm realizing that given what some of you have typed in, that the next activity might be a little bit of a cut and paste. We're moving to activity 2 just to keep us to time and to keep the dynamic nature of what we're doing going. Again, we might poke a couple of people and prompt them to speak on behalf of their points. If you haven't added your name to your wonderful comments in the first section, please remember just to make sure that we've got your name attributed to your comments. If you do need to cut and paste something that you've said before, please do so. If you feel that there's an aggregation point that somebody is saying the same things as you, you can cut and paste from what they're already wonderfully typed, and you might say me too. There's a sense with this activity that we want to confirm the premise is data deletion or data disposal part of that life cycle something that you're interested in spending some time thinking about going forward? So we understand that there are many important activities that need to take place, possibly before we hit the delete button. DMP activities have contributed a lot. We think about our data practice before we start on the data journey, hopefully for some of us, or we reuse data practices from past projects that we felt were appropriate. But right at this endpoint where we're realizing we have a lot of old data, a lot of messy data, a lot of untagged, unmetadataed raw data. There's a need for us to think about this space as well. And are you feeling the pain? Vashti in the document is talking about code and old code, and that makes me both smile and shudder. We have benefited so much from the almost serendipity of Git as a practice, where Git itself almost turned code into an auto repository technique. And there's a lot of old code in storage systems that's gone dark and fallow, and the code in Git at least seems in a great healthy place. I wonder if there are some observations there from modern and emerging code practices that are interesting to sort of data practices as a whole. There's comments from Andrew Trelaw about sort of the national dimensions of just the macro conversations about the cost of retaining data at scale. That's my observation from my university practice, is that I'm paid as a university to do data work. I'm not paid by my funding agencies really to keep the data, and especially I'm not funded to keep it for 7 years or 15 or 25 years. Thanks, I was paid to do data work for 3 years. If you're, requiring me to keep it, can you also pay for the retention? Does somebody want to take the baton and lead a conversation around their particular pain points for a moment before we start naming and shaming?
I'll make 2 points. So it's David here from New Zealand. So Claire mentioned the fact that Crown Research in New Zealand have to operate under the Public Records Act. So in theory, that provides us with a framework around retention and disposal and a schedule and so on, which we don't follow. But one of the issues is that we're not actually checked for compliance. So although we have to show that we're kind of trying to do it, and that we have a retention and disposal schedule, and we've got sort of an action plan for doing it, the body that's responsible for auditing us doesn't actually have either the knowledge or the ability to check for us whether we're complying anyway. So that's point one. The other one is that there's a whole heap of different types of data as you move down through the data life cycle. There's the raw, the analyzed, modeled. There is the working data. There's the data you shared. There's the data that's maybe published, the data that's maybe turned into a product. Not all of that has metadata, right? Often during the project phase, it's got very minimal metadata, and it's only really when it becomes shared or published that you get a proper metadata record. That makes it really difficult to identify what I think in the Australian, New Zealand context, it's called debris data. So in fact, it would be easier to find the stuff that you might want to keep than it is to find the stuff that you might want to dispose of. I mean, the other thing is we are looking at tools to see if we can actually get a better handle on the data we've got in our systems, even things like their age and so on. But just because the data set is cold doesn't mean it isn't important. It's just not important right now.
Yeah, that distinction from raw or debris, and it's not really research data until the researcher themselves or there's a practice to say that this is a product that we value. You might have a lot of raw or a lot of processed debris that you're willing to generate to get to a product that you're happy with. And that was a useful observation for us. Anybody else want to comment? Andrew's got his hand up.
Yeah, sorry, on that point you just made, Luke, and I made a note on that before, data isn't research data until the researcher says it is. What if the researcher's wrong? What if the researcher has a mandate from their funding agency that they have to keep it for a certain period of time? They don't know, they don't care, they don't agree with it, and they say to you, Luke, I'm happy for you to delete this data, or I'm requiring you to keep this data forever. Do you just say, yes, you're the researcher, I trust you implicitly? Or do you say, no, you had an NHMRC grant, you have to keep it for this defined period of time?
Organizations like universities are increasingly risk aware and have risk control practices. Deletion to a researcher might not be a real deletion, at least not for a while. I do want the disciplines and the researchers to be the lead actors in determining certain aspects. I do want some checks and balances across the systems from you're working on a piece of contract-based research. We need a product. I need something to show and tell for it. I need an audit capability that my systems are able to deliver on, and I don't have most of those tools in place at the moment. But I'm imagining a more healthy ecosystem. But really, my ability to judge what is data and what is not data, if I'm one step removed, is pretty. I can't tell what's in those systems unless somebody tells me to do it. The automation tools probably aren't going to be there for a generation, so my default is keep it. So that's an interesting poor loop that we're in at the moment.
I think if I could just add to that as well, and then I'll hand over to Lauren. I think we have to trust the researcher, right? I think there's a research integrity aspect in here that we have to take their word for it. I think the key bit that's missing in my view is how that communication happens, right? Because I, as a researcher with my research hat on, want to do what's right by my data. But actually, what's my data? What's debris? What needs to be kept for the evidence of to support the publication are all kind of different things, right? And unless we have systems in place that someone like Luke can come along and say, oh, look, this is Claire's data that she's keeping for this. This is Claire's debris that I'm going to get rid of in a year's time. How do we move from the mess we have, I guess? I would have thought. But Lauren, I'll hand over to you.
Yeah, thanks. I think I'm just kind of going to echo, I guess, some of the things you said. In my kind of previous role, I worked for a university library supporting data management, right? And I had to give a talk about why researchers should share their data. This is to heads of departments, but unbeknownst to me, they just had a talk about the new GDPR rules that came in, which told them they had to delete all their data. Had I known that, I would have said different things, right? And of course, GDPR has exceptions for research data, but I think there's a tension between these different requirements. And GDPR is a much scarier ruling than, say, your funders' ruling for data retention. So I think there's that, and I put it in the notes, this kind of mixed messaging that sometimes researchers get, and they don't really understand what the requirements are for their specific point of view. But like now I'm working for a publisher, right? So I'm seeing it all from a slightly different angle where the research integrity and reproducibility angle is really important. And obviously, you know, there's that bit of data that is shared alongside a publication. And I think researchers are really good at identifying what that is, or, you know, they're doing a reasonable job of it. But I guess there's all that kind of other data that you're talking about. Maybe it's the unprocessed data or you know, this kind of data like drift that they might not share, but actually might be really important for research integrity purposes, you know, when concerns are raised about an issue. And a lot of the time it's genuine mistakes. And, you know, publishers want to go back and help them look through their data and work out those mistakes. And if they're not sure about keeping that or where it is, that can make it really hard. And, you know, no one wants to have their paper retracted, right, for an honest mistake. And so I think there's also those tensions there about making sure that we kind of advise researchers well enough so that we're thinking about future reasons why they might need to keep their data.
Some banter in the chat about GDPR, and similar things could be said about the data plan movement and how we all got into doing data planning with all the very best intents to improve our practices and put a lot of red tape into our systems and in front of researchers. We certainly got a lot more mature data conversations, some better data planning, a bit of good data results from my personal experience of having done data plans for 7 years and having some good, useful metadata as a result. But I can't really use a lot of those data plans to carry out decisions about retention activities. Hopefully they were more useful to the researchers than they are for me as a planner. Let's keep moving, unless somebody's really keen. Françoise?
Yes, it's just there are many people who are working to help researchers to provide their data management plans. And I think that the discussion about which data has to be kept at which stage of a project is really critical. And it has to be put in all the support activities from the start.
Thank you. All right, moving us to Sprint C, where we're taking now an actor-based view, and in a way it does flow a little bit from Françoise's point, but some of those contributions from support staff, from librarians, from even the publishers as actors in the data lifecycle loop now having a strong point. Of course, the role of what is publishing in a new web world and certainly in an AI world will be called into increasing question. I'm sure the publishers have their own views about who owns which data where and who can reuse it for what, which will be fun to watch as rights gets exercised over data that were created for the public good, and different organizations try to extract value at different points in the life cycle. In terms of just our immediate capability of working together, if we were to think about a data disposal as an activity for our group, to establish a working group, what are the types of actors that we would have to consider in this, especially in data disposal thinking? Apply your brains that might find some nuances to this bit of thinking. Certainly from your experiences and your pain points, this might add a lot of nuance to how we're thinking about it. We might find some interesting levers. We might find some interesting activities that could be valuable contributions.
good to see AI has made it into the document. I feel like we can't have a conversation without AI entering it.
Well, I have to be on trend. I was at a, HPC AI conference all week with people trying to sell me cool products that would replace half my team. So. It's interesting to see what gets surfaced by the AI, and obviously it's at a certain scale point or decision points inside that decision looping. But some of our more interesting small data or things with small sample sets that might have gotten prominence before either will or won't emerge. We saw that with search, with sort of Google searching and relevance criteria and what made it to the top in terms of the response. And I have some concerns for our overly homogeneous AI overlords, but I'm interested to see where the room is at. Did anybody find that a particularly useful or triggering question? Does anybody want to say, yeah, the actor dimension? I know Witold and Jitka, especially Jitka, raised that early on in our early conversations, that this was an interesting angle to cut through. What about people in the room? Max, not to put you on the spot again, but you typed excellent questions, so I'm just going to see if you want to get the voices in the room going a little bit.
Oh, well, it's a really tough question. This is a really difficult thing. You're responsible. A lot of the people that I deal with in Australia with the previous work that I was doing here found themselves to be incapable of making decisions about things that were costing them a lot of money to manage in an operational sense, so store, and they didn't feel empowered that they were able to make decisions over that particular content. And when you pushed them a little bit and said, well, if you don't know what it is, if you don't know who is responsible for it or who owns it or who generated it, why are you keeping it? And the answer to the question would almost invariably be, well, just in case, which is like a proxy for I don't want to be accountable for making a decision on something over which I have, an implied responsibility. So it's a really messy area, and I think we would do well to try and unpick it, at least to understand the different roles that exist in that space. So that's what the point was making.
Sandra and Roman, you've both brought out policy as components, and that's an angle that I hadn't thought of, that the policy almost determines the actor, if I'm reading your comments correctly. But do either of you want to take that policy angle a little bit further by sharing that to the group aloud?
Yeah, I think personally, people can often have differing views of how to decide when to delete something or how to retain it and so on. So I think that policy is always a good guidance. And policies do not have to be a restraint. Of course, there are different ways to then how do you automate a complex policy, for instance. But I think it could be messier if there's no policy in place.
Thank you. Roman?
Yeah, just to explain what I meant with policies, I thought of, let's say, rules that are set up by the repository. So let's say, for example, the terms or conditions that should be communicated to the researchers and data providers. So that kind of policy, maybe policy is not the right term there, but those kind of rules. That was what I had in mind.
Thank you. And Lauren, I find your comment about integrity and repositories also interesting. Do you want to expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. I'm kind of conscious that a lot of the work I've done in, however many years I've been in this space is telling people to go and just stick their stuff in repositories, right? But as someone who ran a repository, we then had conversations like, okay, when have we got too much stuff? When can we start retiring some of that data? And I think it would be interesting to involve repositories in this kind of conversation. Like, they say they'll preserve things for the long term, but actually how is that sustainable? Like, what does that look like for them in terms of giving perhaps someone like an author the power to actually say, I think this should be retired, or help make decisions about using the infrastructure and there are environmental costs, right, of having bigger and bigger kind of data centers and that kind of stuff going on. So I think that's an interesting kind of conversation to have, and and just the kind of all the things around integrity and making sure that there is that trust and transparency in research kind of go alongside that, and making sure that the research record and the evidence record is all there.
Right. Thank you. Jenny and Villa, you're talking about data stewards and curators sort of in two lines next to each other. I was wondering if you'd want to share a little bit about that as well.
Yeah, in the University of Helsinki, where I also work for, so there is a system for long-term retention nowadays that there is a data steward who keeps process going on, and final decisions are made in faculties, but data stewards keeps on eye different kind of deadlines and requirements of the metadata and so on and so on. And then, okay, they collaborate with technical stuff, and then there is a deletion of the data from different places, from repositories and storages, and also backups, which is in different places and so on. So there is a whole life cycle and whole process of thought. Yeah.
Jenny, anything to add?
Yeah, I wish we would have all these routines in place, but I agree with that there should be a life cycle, and that it would be helpful to have experts around to help implementing the policies once they are defined.
And Alex, you speak to a practice with repository admins. Do you want to share a little bit about that?
Well, that's only just to say that those of us running the research data repository that have sight of when the retention periods are up, and have an idea of the metrics that might suggest whether or not the data set is being well used or has been completely ignored since it was first published, and are therefore the ones that are in a position to be able to make a decision, and the people who would actually have to perform the deletions themselves. It would be really great if we could involve the faculties and departments in the decisions, but they're all busy people as well, and what kind of buy-in are we going to get from them on something that is quite a administrative activity?
Yeah, it feels like the most important person in the data loop is the potential data archivist who'll be looking after the data in 400 years after I'm well and truly dead, and that's the person that I'm currently working for. That's a strange loop. Anybody else that, rather than me calling out your name, that you'd like to volunteer? I'm really appreciating the long form sentences and the well articulated thinking around actors that we've captured in this particular section. I'm happy to give this a couple more minutes given the details that are emerging here. Some of you have typed really passionate and interesting words, so if you want to share any of those aloud.
Luke, I just wanted to check as well, what time is the session meant to finish?
Good to check on us. Are we on the hour, finishing on the hour?
About 6 minutes ago.
Yeah, I thought it was
ago?
6 minutes ago.
All right. Well, I was operating
Maybe
to a wonderful schedule in my head that is totally disconnected from reality because I'm not in my usual time zone. Well, with that said, did we do a good job? Okay, well, there seems to be. We would like to take this idea of a working group a little bit further. We're going to have one more session, in which case we'll use the other time zone session maybe to fill in some of the other row items that we haven't gotten through. We're interested in, collaborating with this group further and to see if there's an activity. I should have pushed through to the policy space because I think that is of interest to collecting that at least as an artifact that could be relevant that we could take actions from. So feel free to comment inside this document at your own pace and to see if you want to add anything else. We won't require you to stay online for any time longer. I'll stay on for a few more minutes if anybody wants to have a conversation either in the document or online. But with that, we give you our thanks and we apologize for poor timekeeping practices. But thank you very much for your being participants in a really interesting BoF.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks everyone. I think just to add to that, if as people are going, if they wanted to leave email addresses and we can do a follow-up, that's also something. We got your name and institution, but didn't specifically ask for email, so that's maybe on us as well. But if you want to leave that in there, that would be great, and we can follow up with working group outcomes.
I was very much surprised by my clock going completely awry there.
But Luke, I'm with you there. I also thought we had 20 more minutes. Obviously,
I was loving the interaction by our colleagues. It was so cool to see everybody typing. Yeah, big room, really lots of.
Great. Well done. I think that was a great workshop. There was lots of really interesting feedback and no, well done. Yeah.
Thanks, Max. Always great to have you in the room. I'll see you around soon. All right, thanks, colleagues. I'll be a little bit more punchy, but I'll be a little bit more time aware for the next session. I thought the approach worked well. Obviously, we're ambitious again with how much we knew that was going to be the case, but I thought I'd at least be able to punch through. But the interaction was good and the different voices from the audience was great. So I think our little brain starter presentations were fine and really topical for the types of things that emerged. Sorry, Lisanne, you were saying?
I was just saying it was perfect. Really, well done to all of you. It was, yeah, great. I'm happy to be part of this.
I think that it's a topic that people share the pain, right? And
Yeah.
keen to talk about the messes that we all have, as it were. So no, it was good.
Well, it means that we can now, when we do the emails for for conversations, we know that there's a group that'll be interested in at least responding. So again, time zones will play a role, and you can't get everybody at an RDA level of hype during the rest of the the time zones, but if it means that there's a critical mass of people, if we could get 40 people during an RDA, that's pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, this was virtual and spread all over the globe. So in real participation on site, we would have completely full. This is something we need to take in account. Also, we will have a follow-up session on this, and I think there we will collect the other half of the globe, so to say, and we can definitely look a bit into focusing more on the question that we had to skip today.
Yes, but, that's right.
It's also good to have the document for the participants.
Yeah,
that they can add on to that.
I think that next group can read quickly through some of those comments and add some me toos, which lets us move much faster through that first section. And we aim for the interactivity around the second half. Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's really good. I'll see all of you online very soon. Witold, I'll send you an email to see if you're well enough for us to catch up tomorrow. Otherwise, rest up and hope you get better.
Yeah. I'm sorry.
Cool. Canada, you can go and sleep now, and Claire, you can finish the rest of your day.
Yes, great to see you all.
Anything that you need, extra hands with, please just, I'm available. I know Amanda, we're all very keen to keep the ball rolling, so just feel free.
Fabulous. No,
Thank you.
William, yeah, absolutely. Cheers.
Right on.
Just had a question. Do we want to export the chat before we leave? Because there were some good questions.
Oh, can we do that? Yeah.
I think so.
Well done, curation practice.
I've already looked through the chat so far. I had some questions that were also reflected in the document. So it's because we have the structured information, the document, and there it's also attached to concrete questions. I think it's okay to leave the chat out of the documentation this time. But otherwise, it's absolutely important to save a copy of this, as this won't be saved with the recording. Speaking of the recording, it's still running. I'll stop that.
Okay.